Hey guys, Diego here. I just want to preface this video with a quick message. My audio here is awful. I had the wrong mic selected in my Streamlabs setting. I was actually using my webcam's built-in mic to record the audio. This is what it's normally supposed to sound like. So yeah, going forward with more videos in this style with Javi, it'll sound much better. But with that being said, I hope you still enjoy. Thank you. Hello everyone and welcome to a different kind of video for the channel. I have my friend here, Javi from Cryptbox Games. My name is Diego and we have both beaten Resident Evil Village. Javi, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Diego, and I'm ready to talk about Resident Evil.
Are you ready to enter the survival horror?
Yes, I'm ready.
Awesome, man. So yeah, Resident Evil Village is finally upon us and I've been super excited to talk with another hardcore fan about Resident Evil Village, the latest entry in the iconic horror franchise. Now, Javi, Resident Evil is a franchise I have kind of a weird relationship with.
Hmm,
I
tell me.
I love Resident Evil. I don't love most of their. Oh, I don't like a lot of their games, to be honest.
Hmm.
I'm what you might say. I kind of had a rocky relationship with Resident Evil, probably after Resident Evil 4. As Resident Evil 4 is a masterpiece.
Hmm.
Now, for some reason, I'm a Resident Evil purist, right? I love the classic Resident Evil games. So after Resident Evil 4 took a turn to the more actiony approach, I was like, I kind of had, I'm not sure if I want this. And then they leaned into it more with Resident Evil 5 and then 6 and Revelations. And Resident Evil kind of took upon this new identity of, the over the shoulder camera, more action approach that influenced a lot of third person, just the third person
Yeah,
shooter genre as a whole.
you wouldn't have Dead Space without Resident Evil 4.
Exactly. And a couple years ago, when we got Resident Evil 7, I loved that we kind of got a return to form with more of a, survival horror with the resource management, puzzles, kind of exploration, the one singular area. So I fell in love with Resident Evil again after Resident Evil 7. And I kind of want
Interesting.
to get your perspective on your relationship with the Resident Evil genre, or Resident Evil
Uh,
franchise, I should say.
yeah. Resident Evil has been around since I was a child. Like it's been a staple of my gaming life. I remember reading. Where was I? It was like at Target or maybe Media Play. Did you ever hear of Media Play? It turned into FYE at some point. But
No, that doesn't ring
anyways,
a bell.
it's like a boutique entertainment store. But I remember looking at a strategy guide for Resident Evil 2 on PS1. And for whatever reason, I remember this specific detail. It was about the first or second encounter with William Birkin, and it talked about how if you get his damage low enough, he's gonna rip off a pipe and then swing the pipe at you, and you'll fall into the sewers. But be careful because there's an alligator down there and all this stuff. And I was like, my imagination ran wild, and I'm like, I need to play this. This sounds so crazy, because I grew up with Nintendo games, and I'm still like a big Nintendo kid, but the idea of a video game that is supposed to make you uncomfortable, to make you scared and on edge, like that was a foreign concept to me at the time. And so Resident Evil really was the gateway into kind of horror games. And so I did that year get Resident Evil 2 on N64, which is what I had at the time. And I legit couldn't get past the first area because it just drops you in surrounded by zombies. It's got tank controls, which I didn't understand at all. It was just a terrible experience. I was so excited for this game and it just didn't work. But I had a friend who was a big Resident Evil fan. He used to rent them all the time from Blockbuster. That's how old I am. And he came over for my birthday when I got that game, or no, he was there when I got the game, and he basically I have this fond memory of everybody from the party being gathered around as he was kind of like leading us through Resident Evil 2 and like totally showing me how it worked. And like that's still my favorite of the franchise. The original Resident Evil 2, special place in my heart. I own it on everything that it's out on, even GameCube.
Nice.
And yeah, so I've always been Team Resident Evil. I love most of the games, probably not Zero. I don't really like Zero. Um, but yeah, like you were dead on with your description. Like Resident Evil 4 came out and kind of flipped the script, and I think the franchise needed that at the time. And it was such a big seminal moment, not just for Resident Evil, but for games. It kind of changed like what you thought games could be, especially over the shoulder third person games. So yeah, anyways, but I do think you're right that the trajectory of Resident Evil from that point on was kind of in a downward spiral because
You got the weird
they were
spin-offs like Raccoon
yeah.
City. What was
Oh
the
yeah,
multiplayer one? It was like this.
Outbreak.
Yeah, Outbreak, and there was one that came out not too long ago. It was like strictly like PvP
Oh,
multiplayer.
Umbrella Corps.
Yes, that's the
What a
one.
piece of shit. Yeah,
That's got to
yeah,
be rock bottom for the
for sure.
franchise.
But that's a strange rock bottom because it came after 7, didn't it? Or was it right before 7?
It's fairly recent, like
Yeah, it's pretty
it was
recent.
around that time. So
And I'm getting big Umbrella Corps vibes from RE-verse, which
yeah.
I mean, it's a little better, I would say. I did enjoy the demo for RE-verse, but it is kind of whatever.
So
Anyways, oh, sorry. Yeah, so where was I? The Resident Evil franchise after 4 was kind of stuck in this action slump. 6 was disliked by everyone. Even though I do think it has its perks as kind of like a goofy game you can laugh at and play with a
right,
friend.
it's kind of like when a movie it's so bad it's good. Resident Evil 6 is
Right.
kind of the video game version of that.
Right, and it's so long and has like 4 campaigns in it that like there's got to be something to like in there. Even though a lot of it is filler. But yes, but I remember being ecstatic when Resident Evil 7 was announced and when it came out and like how it was looking cuz like everybody else I was devastated by the cancellation of Silent Hills. I think PT to this day is still the best piece of horror content, like a video game horror content. It's such a perfect little encapsulated experience. I'm also kind of grateful that Silent Hills never came out because now PT has just risen to this like legendary
Yeah.
place, which it totally deserves.
It's like a myth because you get that whole thing. Like I think at some point in the future, it will kind of reach like myth status because it's been
Oh, for
taken
sure.
off the digital. You can't download it. Oh, if you
Hmm.
only have it already in your PS4, that's the only way to play it. So it's got like this
Exactly.
kind of mysticism surrounding it.
Hmm. We're lucky enough that me and my wife both have our own PS4s, and we both had PT installed on them. So we have 2 copies of PT here. Hopefully,
Nice.
our house doesn't burn down or anything. That would be the most precious item. No. Uh, anyways, yeah. So I felt the sting of PT or of Silent Hills getting canceled, but then suddenly Resident Evil looks like it's about to take on the mantle. Like they weren't shy about their influence, right? Like they even had a couple of demos for Resident Evil 7 that they put out to kind of mimic the PT.
Right, where they do like weird stuff, where stuff changes in the demo.
Yeah,
Every time
yeah.
like an update happens, really
Hmm.
interesting. Like that's really good marketing for the game. Really builds up that hype. You
And I
know,
wish they had done that for 8, honestly. The
they
demos
were
for
really
8 were
weird with eight.
whatever. Yeah, the 30 minutes. Like they did that with 2 remake also, and I
Right, the
didn't
one
like that
shot
either.
demo. Yeah, I'm not a
Yeah, yeah.
fan of that time stuff. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, but I'd say my relationship with Resident Evil is similar to yours. When I was a kid, they're not kid friendly games. Not just because of the like violence and all that, but just the concept of the tank controls, fixed camera angles, making sure. I remember like I would watch my dad play them and seeing him stress over like, do I have enough bullets? Do I have enough herbs to make it to the next boss fight? Like that overwhelmed me way too much to ever
Hmm.
get into the Resident Evil games as a kid. So it wasn't until I was in my early teens where I reintroduced the franchise to myself and played it. And for me, the Resident Evil like lore has always been kind of like a secondary thing. when I play Resident Evil games, I'm more about the gameplay mechanics. You know, that thrill you get of managing your resources and figuring out a puzzle and finding a key item and like, oh yes, I know what this is for, and then you backtrack to that door that was locked, and that excitement of unlocking a new area to the mansion or the police department. I never really cared for the characters. Like, not that they're bad, and it's interesting because what I want to say is that they might be a little too over the top for me, right? Like I think Resident Evil kind of tends to dip into kind of like an anime flavor kind of thing, which is weird to say for me because I love Metal Gear Solid, and I feel like Metal Gear Solid also can, you can also say that about Metal Gear Solid, that the characters are very like over the top and anime. But for some reason, Metal Gear just resonated with me a whole lot. And I see like Resident Evil out there has a big fandom that loves these characters and they're iconic, and they love to see them return. But for me, I don't know, they just never really vibed with me. And when it really went over the top with, uh, I want to say, because Resident Evil at one point was more about this science fiction, like Umbrella Corp doing shady stuff, and then it started dipping into characters that want to become like gods, and like I think
Hmm.
Code Veronica, I want to say was, I haven't really sat down and properly played Code Veronica, but I remember like some character like that has this
So
godlike
yeah,
complex.
Resident Evil is full of people. Like Umbrella's whole deal is like, what's their goal, right? And really, it's kind of take over the world in a way. It's very vague. They do it in broad strokes. I'm sure that this video is gonna get some hardcore Resident Evil lore fans that are like, actually, it's about this and that. But you're right. There are like world domination supervillains all over the place in Resident Evil. I mean, that's part of the charm, I think. Like these games are kind of silly, but I'm really glad you brought up characters though, because like I have a bone to pick with the internet right now.
Uh-huh.
Everyone's so mean to Ethan Winters. Everybody hates Ethan Winters, and like, listen, you're saying that these characters, a lot of them are icons, right? And people love them. I love them. I think they're iconic. You look at Leon in his RPD outfit, you look at Claire in her red jacket,
The
and it's like,
hair.
wow, so memorable. You know who these people are. But do you? Like that's my argument. Because Ethan Winters, I would argue, is one of the most fleshed out. I guess fleshed out might not be the right word, but like one of the characters that actually emotes more than anybody in the series. I think that Leon is easily the face of the franchise, if there is one. Leon has been in the most games, in the most popular games. He's kind of just in. He's like the star of every CG movie they make. But like I did this in my stream when I was playing RE8, and like there was a part where Ethan's like freaking out because everybody keeps dying on him or whatever. I'm like, really look at this reaction to what just happened. It's like, have you seen anything like this from Leon? What's Leon's personality? There isn't one. He's just
Totally.
so bland, and he's the star. And like no, none of the other characters are any better. There may be little moments here or there you could point to, but they're not really characters. They're like you kind of like base whatever you think of them off of their designs. They don't actually do much.
I'm glad you brought up Ethan Winters because, kind of like prefacing this whole discussion with our relationship with Resident Evil. And really quick, when Resident Evil 7 comes in, and it's like this tonal shift for the franchise, right? I think, I mean, you might argue now that we have Village, but I think 7 at the time might have been the most violent of the franchise because it kind of has like this Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of vibe
Yeah.
to it, where it's like super gritty and gross, and the characters are really intimidating because they're so, they kind of got that backwood hillbilly vibe, where you're like the hills have eyes kind of thing, like
It
that
grounded the series. Like going
totally,
from 6 to 7, like 6 starts with the entire city exploding behind you while you're running away, and it's no big deal.
yeah,
7 is just a small house in the bayou and
totally.
just crazy creepy shit.
And with that
You're right.
grounded take, you also get a more grounded character of Ethan Winters, where he's set up to kind of be the everyman who, like, because yeah, these characters like Chris, Jill, Leon, they never show any fear, right? Like they don't freak out at the sight of a dead body or a monster, whereas Ethan Winters does, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing to introduce to the franchise because very much how Resident Evil 4 introduced, a new approach with its gameplay. I think I was really fascinated with Resident Evil kind of having the balls to be like, no, like we're not gonna have you play as any of the established characters that we know everyone knows and love, and here's this
Yeah.
totally random dude, and you're kind of
Yeah.
taking in this world from a completely different perspective, and that really fascinated me, and I was hoping for the franchise to continue in that route, and I'm not entirely sure if Village committed to that. Now, but before we get into like why and into the spoilers and stuff, I want to get your general kind of overall impression on how much you enjoyed Resident Evil Village from a gameplay standpoint, story standpoint, without any spoilers.
Yeah, I mean, coming hot off the heels, like it's crazy to think that Resident Evil 3 remake was just a year ago. Like these games are coming out fast. And I think that Village is maybe the best it's ever played. It like the action is a lot snappier. Like most of us, we played through 7 before this came out just to kind of get refamiliar with it. And 7 is a much slower, much more methodical feeling game. Um, so like mechanically, I think 8 or Village is totally sound. The combat really pushes you. So I played on hardcore my first time through, and you have to play well. Like this game, you were talking about how the old ones aren't accessible for like kids and stuff, or they're difficult. They expect you to play them really well and play them responsibly with your inventory. And I think that when you ratchet up the difficulty in Village, it also asks that of you to an extent. It's not as brutal as the old games where there are checkpoints, but not a lot of them. I mean, you can get screwed, but anyways, yeah, I think that 8 was firing on all cylinders. I really love that game. I mean, that's really the long and short of it.
Great, great. I'm happy to hear how much you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as well. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I did Resident Evil 7. I feel like Resident Evil 7 was a much more focused experience where, and it does have its rocky bits, with the mine area and maybe the boat area a little bit too. Uh, but for the most part, I like that it was a slower approach, return to form, survival horror, where a lot of people on the internet are saying that this game sometimes feels like a spiritual sequel to Resident Evil 4 rather than
Yeah.
Resident Evil 7, because you kind of get like this bombastic adventure where it really ramps up the action and the obvious with it taking place in a village and then a castle. um, I was kind of hoping that Resident Evil Village would stick to the formula of 7 a little more, where you have a kind of a more focused experience, and because I thought that by now we had kind of moved on from the Resident Evil 4s, 5 and 6s, where they really lean on action, and we kind of do a go full cycle and start from the beginning, where it's more like a Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 2, where it's slower, takes place in this one environment. But as a whole, I mean, I really enjoyed my time with it. I think the first person perspective still really works for Resident Evil, which is even though the franchise has had its spin-offs. Dead Aim, I believe, is the one that's kind of
Yeah.
it's like a light gun, right? Something
There's
like that.
Umbrella Chronicles
Right.
and Dark Side Chronicles.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Resident Evil Survivor was also a arcade shooter,
right,
I think.
right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that the person perspective, obviously, like something that a lot of horror games tend to do nowadays, ever since the success of Amnesia and games like Outlast, which I'm really glad that Resident Evil didn't fall into that trap of trying to be
Yes.
too hard like one of those games. I
I don't I
love
don't I
that.
don't even I don't even want to give those games credit by saying that they're too hard. Like the mechanics, like fundamentally those games are just hide and wait and then go and then hide and wait and then go. I have a real chip on my shoulder for like Outlast and stuff. Like I hate that genre. Like growing up a Resident Evil kid or even a Silent Hill kid, like you can take action in those games. You can do things to defend yourself, to get into trouble, to do all sorts of different stuff. But like when the only mechanic is don't get seen by a vision cone and that's it, I
Yeah.
can't stand it.
Yeah,
Anyways.
and even with a horror game that gives you the opportunity to fight back, it can still remain scary.
Oh yeah,
It's not going to take
definitely.
any away of the scare factor. Um, so yeah, so I'm glad Resident Evil didn't fall into that trap. In terms of story, without getting to spoilers yet, I did like Resident Evil 7's more grounded take. And even though it got a little crazy towards the end, spoilers for Resident Evil 7 if you haven't been in it, when Jack turns into the giant black goo monster, I feel like at that point, that's the craziest that game got, where it gave me like, like a Resident Evil 4, 5, 6, 5 with, a giant uh, Monster Man thing, which it's
I
not
don't
like as a disrespect to the franchise, because
I
giant
don't think
monsters are a
that's
thing.
I don't think that's unique to Resident Evil 4, 5, 6. I think that like Resident Evil 2, like William Birkin with his glowing eyeballs in every form, like that's just a staple of the franchise. That's like to me that was like the game going, by the way, this is still Resident Evil.
Fair
Like
enough, fair
it's
enough.
not just Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's also yeah. I don't know. I liked it. That's all I'll say.
Then you're right. Yeah, because as I was saying that, I started remembering. Wait a minute. There's Tyrant. There's the giant uh, gooey train monster at the end of Resident Evil 2. So yeah,
I
so
think yeah, I think 7 like it this is a Metal Gear problem. We'll get to that when we talk about Metal Gear someday. But um there's it's one of those things where like there's where you want this what you want the series to be and what you think would be best direction, and you see hints of that like in 7, I would say. And then there's what the series has kind of always been, and it's a little nonsensical and goofy and campy. So and I think that 7 like clashed with those two, and I think maybe that's why a lot of people went into 8 and were not feeling it because they were hoping that it would lean back into the like more serious, grounded, realistic kind of what 7 was kind of going for until it went off the deep end. But yeah,
yeah, so yeah, it's fair enough. I think it is important to have something that's recognizable for the franchise, right? Because like hypothetically, you bring up Metal Gear. If Metal Gear got some sort of reboot, and it was more of a grounded take, and the game doesn't end with a fight against a giant mech, then it wouldn't be Metal Gear, right? So that
yeah. Well, that's the what I was alluding to here was kind of like how you want Resident Evil to kind of be something that I'm arguing it never was. I'm that way with Metal Gear. Like I'm a diehard Metal Gear fan, but I really wish that it was more Splinter Cell, more grounded, more espionage.
really, oh
And
wow,
yeah, like I wrote a whole like really upset blog post when Metal Gear Solid 5 had its first trailer and then it showed off Snake with the horn and the metal arm and stuff, and I'm like,
yeah.
what the fuck is going on? I
Okay,
can't with this.
let's not
Yeah,
fall into
sorry,
this Metal
sorry.
Gear rabbit hole because like that really. So I would love to hear more of that.
Yeah.
We'll save that for like you said when we talk about Metal Gear. Um, but yeah, so we got some of that crazy stuff in 7, and then Resident Evil 8 like really goes into that stuff. And I was going into Village like thinking, okay, this is gonna be more of the majority of what Resident Evil 7 was, where it was like this focused like Texas Chainsaw kind of homage kind of thing. Now, we'll get that with Village, but maybe something with gothic horror, vampires, werewolves. Um,
Oh man. Let me just say, right off the bat, like that is my vibe. Like gothic horror, especially vampires and werewolves, that whole Victorian, violins and cellos, dude, that's why Bloodborne is like one of my favorite games of all time, and it's mostly because of the aesthetic. So seeing Resident Evil, my favorite or one of my favorite franchises, do a take on that was so exciting. And I was gonna mention when you were saying earlier, like after 7 you kind of wanted them to continue to go in that direction. I was gonna say like it's hard to remember, but think back before you knew Resident Evil 8 was happening. Did you really think they were gonna dig up Ethan Winters to be the star of the next game? Like, no, that was
no,
finished. That book was closed. Yeah, like so that was wild. And then on top of that, do you remember when those leaks came out and they were like, reportedly Resident Evil 8 is
Gonna
gonna
have werewolves?
it's gonna have werewolves and it's gonna be like Resident Evil 4 with a village, and it's like that can't be true. But if it is, oh my god, what's going on? Like, yeah, I was so it's wild to think back like how outlandish that sounded and how unlikely it sounded, and then here we are with the game out, and it does kind of deliver on all those things. And yeah, like what I was getting at is that gothic horror, like you already are at an advantage for winning me over when you're dipping
Yeah.
into that.
That's totally a good point when you brought up about Ethan Winters coming back, because I thought what Resident Evil was gonna do now was kind of take like standalone stories, like still have those bits and pieces of like, oh, Umbrella is up to something.
Yeah, kind of
Maybe
like Silent Hill.
totally you'll get a
Yeah.
special appearance from like the legendary characters. Maybe in the next one, like Leon will show up at the end or Jill or something like that. Just to kind of give something for the fans where like
Would Leon show up and be like, "I'm Kennedy," and he looks nothing
yeah,
like
he
him?
looks like his hair is totally gone.
Just shaved head. I'm Kennedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought Resident Evil was gonna go that route, like having these standalone stories that kind of take on a theme, right? With the last one being the Texas Chainsaw, this one being Gothic horror. I think that would have been cool. I was really surprised that they brought back Ethan Winters and gave him like a character arc. And with that, we're getting to spoilers now.
Oh,
We're gonna
spoiler alert!
spoiler
Spoilers.
alert, everyone. We're gonna get into spoilers. I
Let's go.
think like I want to start somewhere a little more subtle, but I kind of want to just jump right into it while
Hit
I'm the.
me with the moment that pissed you off most, where you're like, "Okay, I'm out. I don't like this."
I want to
Hit me.
say there's two, but I think it was when Ethan Winters is a molded monster guy. What were your thoughts on that?
Oh, his not death, huh?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, look, I mean, this is an issue that we all kind of like forgot about or gave up on, or I don't know. Like, it's strange to me that nobody was ever like, wait a minute, how can he reattach his limbs and it's no problem? Like, it's one thing that when like the in Resident Evil 7 there's that cutscene where Zoe's stapling it back on. Okay. It's
sure.
far fetched. It's far fetched, but okay, that's what happened. But then if you get captured by Jack in the following scene in the crawl space room,
Mm-hmm.
it plays a cutscene where he uses the shovel to remove your leg, and then he puts your foot on the other side of the room with the healing bottle and
Mm-hmm.
tells you to crawl over. And then Ethan literally puts his foot in place and then pours some water on it and then stands up immediately, no problem. That's a giant plot hole that no one has ever like I've never seen anybody go, they need to explain this. This doesn't make sense. What's
I,
going on here?
I don't know if everyone else thinks about it the same way I do. Like you said, like the whole Zoe stapling your hand back together, far fetched, but sure, you know. And then when it comes to the whole your foot getting cut off, and then pouring some of that the medicinal liquid or whatever it is, and then it reattaching itself. I felt like that scene being because you can miss it, right? Like that scene may
Yes.
not play for you if you don't
Yeah.
go back to that room at a certain point. I saw it as an Easter egg, as like a wink, kind of like a Metal Gear Solid thing, a wink at the player, like, oh, like we know that, for years, like games don't really explain like how a health pickup works, and you're, kind of instantly revitalized at full 100% health. I saw it as like an Easter egg, like, oh, a wink at the player. We know this is silly, and haha, his foot got reattached, whatever. But then
It's such a
it,
specific thing. I don't know. But yeah.
but then it happens again, and and you can't miss it in Village, where when you're pulling down the lever and Lady D slices your hand off, and not only not only does your hand get reattached, but also the jacket somehow
Did you
reattaches itself.
did you unlock the Rosemary figure, like the character that you can actually the model you can look at?
No, I haven't unlocked any of the figures yet. I haven't like
So if
looked at them yet.
yeah, if you look at Rose and look and zoom in on her sleeve, there's still the mark where his hand was cut off on the
Wow,
jacket. It's a nice little detail.
that's
Really, really
awesome.
nice. Yeah, yeah.
But what surprised me honestly was that yeah, I saw it as a neat little silly goof, whatever. But it comes back and it's a major plot point for Ethan where like they actually acknowledge it, like, yeah, there's a like, do you think they have planned this out from the beginning of 7 where they stapled his hand back
Not a
together?
chance. No, no way. I don't know what they were thinking when they put that in there, but no, I don't think they planned any of that stuff out, honestly. When you look at the concept art that they have in RE8, and all of it has an art director's note, which is so cool. Like it's the next best thing to having like full blown commentary on the game development. But like what I've noticed from the notes is like they were just kind of throwing ideas at the board, and they may or may not use them. They're just seeing how they feel about it, and so I get the sense that nothing was really thought ahead. That they didn't. I don't know if they planned on bringing back Ethan Winters originally. It just turned out that way. At least that's my take on it.
Okay. Now, like the whole thing with Ethan being a molded, the reason that kind of rubs me the wrong way is because they set up Ethan Winters at the beginning of 7 to be this everyman, right? Kind of to be
Yeah.
kind of the insert for the player because they go out of his way to avoid showing his face, which I take as like, okay, so they want me kind of to fill in the shoes because even though he has a voice, I guess like they keep him kind of like an everyman, like, like he doesn't have an eccentric personality to again kind of support that idea that he's an insert for the player, and but then to give him like such a crazy twist where he is this molded monster kind of to me goes against that he's just supposed to be an everyman, and I found it kind of a really hard turn for the character to kind of really to kind of take it for what it is.
Mm. Well, for me, like more than anything, it was kind of like it felt like a ghost story. It felt like like at the sixth sense when it does the flip where like you've been dead all along. Like it actually literally is that you've been dead all along, Ethan, right? And one thing that you can say about these like Resident Evil 7 and 8 is that they wear their influences on their sleeve to the point where plagiarism is even considered. I don't know if you saw
Yes.
yeah. We'll get to that. We'll get to that when we start talking about enemies. But yeah, Resident Evil Village also to me like kept reminding me of Silent Hill 1. Like you're literally a father in a hostile environment looking for his daughter, wearing a green jacket.
Yeah,
Like
I was just gonna bring up the
yeah,
jacket totally.
yeah. Ethan is very much Harry Mason, and literally his daughter has superpowers in both. And
Yes.
Silent Hill 3 revisits that daughter grown up, and then the end credits in this revisits the daughter grown up. She has powers, so yeah, like I think they're influenced by a lot of things. But Ethan being revealed that he was undead the whole time, it's a little odd, and it kind of raises more questions than it answers, I would say. You can kind of fill in the gaps to an extent, be like, okay, so Evelyn just kind of lives rent free inside his brain, and
Yeah.
I don't know why she's keeping him alive when literally he killed her. Like she didn't have control over him for some reason. Maybe it's because she wanted him to be her dad. I don't know, but we have to kind of like fill in those gaps.
Right.
But it wasn't that far fetched to me. And it also explained away. I love the line that she has where she's like, "Didn't you think it was weird how you got hurt all those times and you were fine?" It's like
I,
somebody finally said it in the game.
yeah.
Like that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love just how
Mhm.
self-aware they were. They actually like full on acknowledged it. Um, Also, real funny. I want to bring up. I was laughing throughout the one of the final cutscenes where how I said that they go out of their way to avoid showing Ethan's face. I just found it
Yeah.
so funny
Right.
throughout the whole cutscene. He's just like,
Yeah, for sure. It's so weird. Like what are they afraid of? Like they have great faces. Everybody looks awesome.
totally, and,
Like
and they have like it really confuses me why because they have the face modeled right like when You
Yeah.
can like put in a command to like detach the camera, and you can see that they
Hmm.
actually modeled a face for Ethan. So I don't. It's weird. It's kind of
It's
like
super weird.
muddled communication there with why they want to keep his face a secret or whatever.
It's to the point where the model viewer like of Ethan is literally in shadow above his neck. And it's
Yeah,
like so weird. Why? Why are you guys so afraid of letting us see the main
it's
character?
right.
And I think that that is one of the key components of why everyone fucking hates Ethan Winters. People hate him. You just anything I see on Twitter is like he's the worst,
Yeah,
and people just dogpile. And I'm like, what's so offensive about this guy? He's a little cheesy sometimes. His one-liners are kind of cringe, but like he's overall kind of likable, kind of a goofball. I don't see the problem with Ethan
yeah.
Winters.
To me, he doesn't do anything offensive. Like he is like a really just normal dude. There's nothing extraordinary about him, and
And
because
he had
of
his
that, like
heroic moment at the end of the game, right? Like it's
totally,
like,
which
oh,
was a great moment. Like even with the whole molded stuff, where like I wasn't 100% on. Like I thought his sacrifice was a really good moment.
yeah.
And that with the way Chris Redfield reacts to it, like I actually like I felt for the guy. I might miss Ethan Winters actually,
Definitely,
if
definitely.
if he doesn't return. Because
Oh,
did you see IGN, and I'm sure like there's no deep meaning to it, but IGN just posted a video today where in the very last cutscene, and I want to get into some of the Rose stuff too. But
yeah.
while on the topic of Ethan Winters, did you see the final cutscene where it's the SUV driving off into the distance, and you can see like a guy.
Just the guy standing there. What is
Yeah.
that? Yeah,
So
yeah.
IGN like did the whole detaching camera thing during the cutscene, and it is Ethan's model where he's got the jacket off because he gives the jacket to
No
Rose, and
shit.
it's
Okay.
him in a black hoodie with his face modeled and everything.
Wow.
Um, do you think there's something there, maybe a little bit of a seed that because after all, like he is a molded, who knows to what extent he can survive different things.
I hope not. I think that the ending was just right. Let him be dead. You can
Yeah,
carry on with Rose or Chris or do something else. Yeah.
I think the
Ethan.
game saying the what is it? The father's story is now complete.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like them stamping it,
Mhm.
and Ethan Winters' story is done, and we're moving on.
Yeah, definitely.
Now I want to get into Rose a little bit while on the topic of Winters as a whole. How'd you feel about the final cutscene with Rose now? Working with Chris or something, having powers, kind of like this
That
multiple people in her mind.
that cutscene is confusing. Why is she on a bus and then they're there with an SUV to pick her up? Like, why didn't they drive her there? Why wasn't she like, stop following me? It is very hard to kind of read the situation. It seems like this guy that was picking her up is her caretaker, or he at least watches over her. Um, and then like he gets that call from like the sniper that's like ready
Yeah.
to take her down. Like, what the hell?
They're on
I don't
standby the
know.
whole time just in case.
Uh-huh. That whole thing and Chris and his whole squad, this that all reminds me painfully of The Evil Within, and just kind of like generic men with their sunglasses in suits,
Yeah.
that like I don't know what the hell I don't know what's appealing about that, It's just like shadowy figures that are pulling strings. Like, okay, but I don't know. It didn't do much for me. I think that seeing Rose grown up was very cool. Seeing her talk to her dad, and then also like calling out that she has powers that Chris doesn't even know about. That's interesting. What I want to see from that, I'm not sure. I can't really picture a Resident Evil game where you have powers. I don't really want that.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up because that gives me, which again, like I know a lot of people like love it because it's so bad. I could never really get behind Resident Evil 6. I never enjoyed it really.
Hmm.
And them kind of establishing Rose as this person that might have powers,
He's
kind
kind of
of
like Wesker's kid, right?
exactly. Yeah, it gives
Yeah.
me those vibes, and I don't know. Like I felt like Resident Evil had just found this new approach of being a little more grounded, right? With
Yeah.
having the just a regular person that's not a secret agent or some sort of military trained person, just a regular person in this nightmare. I think kind of like starting to establish Rose as this person with powers starts to go against that, which is what got me excited for Resident Evil again. And to see them kind of like go back to their old ways of Resident Evil 6 and I don't know,
I
like
don't know if I don't think that that's what they're doing. Honestly, I think maybe they're planting seeds that they may or may not revisit in the future. Honestly, I think the next piece of Resident Evil content we're going to see, aside from the Resident Evil 4 remake, the next piece of content we're going to see is likely going to be about Chris and the BSAA or something totally different. I don't think they're going to revisit Rose right off the bat, if at all. And I would prefer it that way, honestly.
how did you feel about Chris's involvement in Resident Evil Village?
Dude, that guy is. That's another thing where I was talking about how they have no plan. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They're just winging it. And Chris showing up at the end of 7, the I'm Redfield moment with a very weird face, and then them riding off in a helicopter that says Umbrella Corporation, but it's a new logo.
Right, it's blue, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure the super diehard Resident Evil lore people, know exactly what's going on. I've seen something about like there's a Neo umbrella, and it's
Yeah.
about like undoing umbrella type things. I don't know why that couldn't just be the BSAA. I don't. But then Chris is also still with the BSAA, sort of, but he's gone rogue in
Right.
this one.
I don't remember much of the ending of Resident Evil 5, or if maybe one of the animated movies touched on this, but I think he was disbanded from BSAA or he retired from BSAA, and
Sure,
like I
that
thought
sounds about
maybe
right.
he started his own kind of rogue squad where he wants to take things into his own hands, right? Even if he
Yeah,
has to get a little dirty.
what was the squad's name in Village? It's like Wolf Night,
Yeah, something like
Night Wolf
that.
something. It's
Something
got
like
wolf
that.
in it. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, it's like appropriate. They're gonna go fight werewolves, and that's the name. But Chris, I don't know, man. Like, I'm glad that his face is fixed. I'm glad that if you put the Chris from Village next to 5 or 6, you're like, okay, that seems about right. This is
Yeah,
what this
totally.
guy would look like.
Totally.
Um, they need to patch 7 so that he looks correct in 7. That'd be great.
Yeah, having this
I don't know
weird
what they were
anomaly.
thinking.
And
Yeah,
I,
what the hell?
to be honest, I think, this kind of goes back to what you're saying, where like they don't really know what they want to do. The way I saw Chris's redesign in Resident Evil 7 was, well, we're gonna get a little more grounded, and we're gonna kind of take Chris back to just looking like a regular dude and not like this super buff guy, super handsome and this superhero looking guy. Like I thought, they're just gonna redesign him to fit that new vision of Resident Evil being a little more grounded and like
Yeah,
kind of having their iconic characters look like people that might exist in the real world, which is weird just because I think the Resident Evil 5 Chris is based off a real person. Like there's a model for
yeah,
him.
yeah. I mean, yeah, the Resident Evil 7 was the first game to use the RE engine, right? And that was
Yes.
the first time they were scanning real people to, play the characters. And so yeah, like if they had stuck with it and this redesigned Chris is the new Chris going forward, okay. I'd rather they didn't, but okay. And like you look at Leon and Claire in the remakes and Jill in the remakes, they don't necessarily look how they did in the originals. They're pretty different because they're real people. They're scanned off of real people. So it wouldn't have been the end of the world, but to change it back again and act like nothing happened is really, really strange to me. Um,
What's even
I do
weirder
think.
is that he's gonna be the Resident Evil 7 Chris is gonna be playable in reverse.
Oh yeah, what the hell? Dude, this what's going on over there? What's going on? Well, also, yeah, Chris shows up in RE7 looking how he does, but then at the same time, Resident Evil Vendetta, the CG movie, was coming out, and Chris looks more like he did in 6. A little
Right.
bit different, but it's close. They just haven't really nailed down that specific character. Like what are the tenets that like make up Chris Redfield?
Yeah. I guess he's the most generic looking. He looks like video game protagonist number 37.
he
So,
here's my thing is that like in 5, I think they fixed that. And 5, 6, and now 8. 5, 6, and 8, Chris, that design is memorable. You know what he looks like. He's a big boy. He usually has like short brown hair, tuft forward, and dark brown hair. I don't know. Like, I always thought that in 5 he looked like Nick Lachey from 98 Degrees. Just like a buff Donkey Kong Nick Lachey. But anyways, yeah. So but then yeah, in Code Veronica and in the original, he did look like a generic kind of dweeb, like nothing to him. So it was cool that they found something, and now they're running with it, which is good. But Chris's involvement in Village is whatever. I think that just because here's a criticism I have, just because they address that like Chris should have told Ethan what the hell is going on. Like I'm glad that that line's in there, and that Chris is like there wasn't enough time, and this guy goes, still you should have told him. Like that's great, but also why not tell him? Like you're shooting the dude's wife in the face and you're stealing his baby and you're like, don't resist.
Yeah.
Stop it, Ethan.
It's
Like
kind of
not
not
a
an easy
word.
thing to just accept.
You could literally just go, that's not Mia, and boom, you've like at least like lowered the tension. Like Ethan's like, what are you talking about? But
Yeah.
no, nothing. I get that it makes it like ooh, a mystery for all of us, but like I don't know. It was a little crazy.
Surprising that you get to play as Chris. I was not expecting that at all. Which feel I
I
mean it feels kind of
was.
tacked on. How'd you feel about that? Getting to play, having this really like run and
Oh
gun
man.
section as Chris.
Man, I so in my opinion, Resident Evil Village, and especially with the playthrough that I did on hardcore, was just a gauntlet. It was like kind of classic Resident Evil where it's like you have to fight for every inch. Especially the factory is the most challenging part with those enemies in there that you have to have like really precise aim and they can take you down in like a hit and a half. So up until the Heisenberg fight, the game was like that, like super super tough, and I really had to like be careful. But once the Heisenberg fight started, and then especially once it ended, my God, this was a victory lap. Like at that point, it's like let's have some fun. Let's take off our pants and just chill. You know, so suddenly you're in this mech with infinite ammo and a grenade launcher. Like, okay, let's do this. But I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But and then Chris Redfield immediately after, and suddenly you're like, wow, okay, this really punctuates that Ethan is just a guy. He's just a random guy. Because everything you shoot with Chris Redfield with your automatic rifle, their heads just pop
Yeah.
off.
It's like
And it's
going
like,
through
oh
butter.
shit. Yeah, like this is a trained soldier here, and really did a great job of making you feel the difference between Ethan and Chris. And really, it is just the gear that they're using, but still, it worked for me.
It puts
Um,
the legendary characters like if they were to do
absolutely,
that with like Leon or something like that, it puts them on another level. Like these guys are
absolutely.
vets.
For sure, for sure. And I really love like after playing the whole game, where you walk into a dark area and Ethan will click on his flashlight or whatever. Suddenly you walk into a dark area and he
Yeah.
puts on his night vision goggles. Like shit, let's go, man. Let's go. This fucking rules. I was so on board. Everything, the whole final act of the game was so bonkers, and I was just smiling from ear to ear. I loved it. I couldn't get enough. I thought it was wonderful.
It's awesome, man. Like, yeah, kind of you saying that whole thing of seeing the difference between Ethan and Chris Redfield. Like at first, I felt like it was a little tacked on and kind of out of place. Like it's kind of weird that they did this,
Sure.
but I think for that purpose of making you feel the difference between the big names of the Resident Evil franchise, it's a really cool to see that. Now, I want to talk about kind of I guess more as a general sense. Going into Resident Evil Village, you start off in the town, the village, then you move on to the castle. I going in, I was expecting very much like Seven for the castle to be like the main setting for the game, but
Yeah,
it's
me
kind
too.
of over really fast, right? Like I thought that was kind of gonna be like just a whole blanket over the game, but then no, the game kind of opens up and you got like different regions that kind of have their own theme going on. Um, I wasn't sure how I felt about that at first. I was kind of hoping for the castle to be kind of expanded up on, because like when you look at the castle from an outside perspective, it is huge,
Yeah.
right? And then you go in, and it's really, you only get like a couple floors, and a couple of
Hmm.
sections of the castle, and I was a little underwhelmed by that, because something that's really important to me for the Resident Evil franchise is making the setting a character, right? The Spencer Mansion, the police station. I love that about the Resident Evil games. Even Silent Hill to an extent. Like obviously Silent Hill
Yeah.
being a major component of the game. I was hoping the castle to be that for this, and it isn't that. Did you feel the same way?
I mean, yeah, like uh, if I had my way, the whole game would be in the castle. Like if you can make Resident Evil 1 entirely take place in a mansion, like you can have a castle be the setting for the game. And maybe discover different exits that lead to the village and that's kind of your hub like they did. That's what I would prefer, of course. What they did though, yeah, I think that, and especially Lady Dimitrescu or Dimitrice, getting like she's the first boss and you fight her relatively early and then that's it. Like that's a shame, especially with what a big piece of the marketing she was.
Yeah, instantly
Um,
iconic.
like I mean, yeah, she might as well have been Mother Miranda. That would have probably been better. Um, but yeah, and another thing is that like I was hoping for a lot more vampire stuff. Like other than her like tasting your blood for a second, they don't really have fangs. Um, there's like bats flying around the castle, which is cool, but I feel like they flirted with the idea of vampires more than they actually, committed to
Committed.
doing
Yeah.
it. But yeah, I guess I keep almost talking about the factory, but we'll get there.
I think I think I know where you're getting at with this factory thing. Um,
Yeah,
so I did like the village like stuck around. It wasn't just like, oh, here's the first section, and then once you go into the castle, then the village is kind of, because that happens with the castle. Once you move on from the castle, you can't go back, right? Like the
yeah,
doors.
it's locked off. Yeah,
Yeah,
that sucks. I hate that,
yeah, totally. Because I think I missed one of the drawers with the
especially
lockpick.
because there's an obvious like entrance that should open up once you finish it. The like front gate
Yeah.
with the bridge, it's just stuck upwards for no reason. Like if they gave you the ability to shoot it down or something, and then
Mm.
now you can revisit the castle. There's nothing really there, but if you missed any treasures or something, like I think that would be huge because you can revisit most of the areas.
Totally. I did appreciate the village being the main hub. It
Yeah,
owns up to the title, where the village will always be there for you to go back to. It is this hub where once you get uh, the ability, when the Duke like pins the treasures on your map, that's
yeah.
that's where a lot of them are. And I don't
When,
know if you struggled like I did, but I struggled navigating the village a little bit. Like I would look at
sure.
a treasure and I'm like, okay, I'm going to that
Uh
treasure,
huh.
and then I go and there's like a tractor blocking
Yep.
off. And I'm like, shit, like what window do I need to crawl through to get to the other side?
Uh-huh. The map was not always reliable. You knew generally where something was, but the path to it on the map is often blocked and you have to figure out,
Yeah,
yeah, how to
I
go
would have
around.
appreciated like a Silent Hill style like red scribble.
Yes. Totally, totally.
Um, but before where do I go next? I kind of okay. So I want to talk about the regions, and kind of
Yeah.
going back to the whole vampire thing, which I think this is where you're getting at. So you got werewolves, right? Being the lichens throughout the majority of the game, mostly the village, and in other parts. You got the vampires in the castle with Lady Dimitrescu and her three daughters. And then yeah, the other regions are the swampy area, right? It's like a cave that then leads into a swamp. So I think rather than this game being like just about lichens and vampires, I think it might be just kind of like universal monsters as a whole.
Absolutely.
Because you got the swamp creature in in that one area, and the factory is kind of Frankenstein.
So you know the name of the movie that they're being. and they're getting in trouble, and people are saying they plagiarized the monsters. The name of the movie is Frankenstein's Army.
Look at that, and that's very much what's happening in that factory. So
Yeah.
you take it away. You wanted to say some stuff about the factory?
Dude, the factory to me, it it evoked a lot of like classic Resident Evil environments that are not necessarily fun to be in, but they are kind of like a winding multi-layered like puzzle to solve. Like understanding which rooms lead into other ones. Like the map's not going to help you in a lot of ways. Like cuz there's just too many staircases that kind of overlay on that B4, the B4 level.
Yeah.
Um and on top of that, they're throwing the toughest enemies in the game at you in the dark, and you have to like specifically target their one thing on their chest that they're covering half the time. Like they really ratcheted up the difficulty, and so I understand why some people are like, "This sucked. I struggled here. I didn't like it. I got lost or whatever the reason." Like I could see why people didn't enjoy it, but I like thrived in that level, like it was tough as hell, but it was so much fun. It really reminded me of the old games. And another thing, I had to write down the names of the enemies, the Frankenstein dudes. They're the Soldat, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you picked up on this. I haven't seen anybody point this out, but the generic Soldat is basically a cyborg version of Tyrant. Like his right arm that usually has claws is that weird drill thing. His
Yes.
heart is exposed and outwards, and it's part of this mechanical thing. He's like bald and gray, and
Yeah.
even like the first one you find on that chair has his teeth showing
He's
because
kind
his
of got
lips
like,
are gone.
does he have like the stitches going across
Like he
them
has
this
big
way?
staples kind of going. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And the
Like
tyrant, he kind of has something like that.
And so when you see them walking around, you see their silhouette and they have the freaking drill on their hand and the glowing heart. I'm like, dude, that is a tyrant. They made little tyrants, a bunch of little mechanical Borg tyrants. Uh, that's fucking cool. I think that's so awesome. And there's something really twisted and creepy, like especially the one that you can get a really good close look at is the one that's in that chair before it wakes up. Which
Yes.
that scene is it's not a coincidence, right? That scene is supposed to mimic Resident Evil 4 with the regenerators, right? There's that regenerator on the
Oh,
bed,
right, right.
and
Yeah.
you know it's gonna get up.
Yeah,
It's gonna get up as
absolutely.
soon as you pick something up. Yeah. So I was like, oh my god, this is the regenerator room. They did that. They did the thing. But yeah, I thought those enemies were great and really. I was gonna say creative, but apparently not because so many of them are based off that movie. But
Ye-
still, like, if you're doing a theme, and it seems like they're doing gothic ancient horror stories, ancient, but horror stories. So you got vampires, werewolves, Frankenstein, and Swamp Thing, and then a dollhouse, which I didn't necessarily think would fit into that, but apparently I looked at the Resident Evil wiki and it says that Donna Beneviento. Here, I'm gonna pull this over here, so I'm looking more towards you. Yeah, Donna Beneviento is based on tropes of Gothic literature. Specifically, she's based on stories of ghosts and ghostly possessions of objects like dolls. Concept art states that the original concept for Donna was simply a ghost. So,
Interesting.
so everything in the game fits this theme. Even like the far out. Like I get that someone with not thinking about it this intensely would like walk into the factory and see the zombies you've been fighting but with like VR headsets and you're like what the
Yeah.
hell's going on here? Like this is too cheesy, this is out of left field,
It's like
this
a
is stupid,
cyberpunk
whatever.
Resident Evil crossover.
Uh-huh. But like alternative, like I understand why someone would feel that way about it, but when I walked in there and I saw the first dude with the fucking VR headset, I was like, are they doing like cyborgs? Are they doing like robots in this game? Like, let's go. Let's see how freaking weird we can get.
uh,
And it was great.
Then I gotta say, you really completely turned me around on the factory. Because walking up to the factory, like I think one of the last things you do might be the swamp monster guy, and then you go into the
Yeah.
factory, and
Mhm.
then walking up, and it's revealed, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna suck.
Dude, no, I heard so many people say the factory, like they never want to play the game again because they don't want to do the factory, and it's like, oh man, this is. I was like basically ready to be, not happy with the factory. I was
Yeah.
expecting it to suck. Yeah.
So walking up to it, I started thinking of this is really industrial looking area in Resident Evil 5 towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
I started getting a lot of vibes from that section. I don't really like that section from RE5. So I was like, damn, okay, all right, let's suck it
Five
up.
and four. Here's the thing: is that like you said at the beginning of this show that four is a masterpiece, and most people say that, and I think I might agree with that. I think four is like it was a seminal game, very important game, excellent game, but people don't talk about the final act of four and how like people don't want to complain about Village
They just
going
kind of
full
brush it under
action.
the
Yeah, yeah.
under.
No, like four is a masterpiece. It's excellent all the way through. Yeah, sure it is. Yeah. Like RE5 is basically a remake of RE4 in like every way, but at RE5 basically it makes a clear line for where it jumps the shark into full-blown act like nonsense action, and it's when you walk up and you see a zombie with a gun, and then suddenly the waist high stuff, you could press A to take cover, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh no, um, but RE4 and 5 both suffer from this, and I think Village handles it more gracefully than both.
That's completely fair, man. Yeah, absolutely. Because that waist high cover stuff when it gives you the prompt, taking like all the like the
There's like 2
evolution.
hours left in the game when they introduce that. It's like, what the hell
Yeah,
are they
it's like.
thinking? Yeah.
But yeah, walking into the factory, I was not because I feel like it kind of started going against the gothic horror stuff that I felt the game was establishing. Which up until like I think it was on Discord when we were talking about Resident Evil Village a little bit, and you said that you have a hot take about the factory that kind of it fits with the rest of the game. It planted that thought. I was like, wait a minute. So yeah, this is not just vampires and werewolves, but it's just kind of just classic monsters as a whole. Kind of like another like I think a fitting piece of media to compare it to is kind of like the Hellboy comic books. Hellboy does a lot with
Mm,
kind of folklore and just classic monsters, ghosts, werewolves, zombies, all that stuff is in Hellboy. And I think that's what Resident Evil Village is going for, just classic monsters as a whole. But yeah,
yeah.
walking into the factory, I'm like, are they really doing robot zombies? You see the like the in the background, like a big what's it, a conveyor belt
Oh
of
man, I love that.
the
That
art.
shot. Like when I was streaming Resident Evil Village, I made that the background because I think it's such a sick image.
It,
Like
it
all the
is the
conveyor
silhouette just kind then just
all the
hanging
bodies just
there.
hanging. Ah, man, that's so good. Did you see there's a trophy for shooting one down?
Oh no, I didn't.
Yeah, you can just shoot across the way and they'll just fall off the conveyor belt.
Oh,
It's
that's
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah.
So seeing the ones with the VR headsets, and then like towards the end, you get some with like jetpacks. They
Yeah,
zip it. I'm
yeah.
like, what
There's
is
full
going
blown Iron
on?
Man. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like they got lasers coming out. Like, oh no,
Hmm.
I'm not digging this at all. But then kind of giving that context of like, no, this is kind of like the Frankenstein themed section of this game. I was like, oh yeah, I kind of love this now. And
Yeah, there you go.
from a gameplay standpoint, I didn't really have a problem with it because for the most part, I felt like Village was kind of easy in the sense of trying to figure out. It felt oddly linear, but
Oh,
not
sure.
really, right? Because you go back to other places, but when you're going into a new region, you're just pretty much walking forward the whole time. Where
Yeah.
with the factory, I did like that. You find the mold, and then you have to think about, okay, I gotta get back to that one place where it pours the lava in to make the key or whatever. And it wasn't until you get to like the fourth floor, and you're supposed to have Heisenberg's key, right?
Yeah.
And the mold area where you make the key is like 3 floors underneath you.
Yep.
And like you said, like the map is
And
not super helpful,
and
and
now the
it
lights are
and
off
the lights
and
are
there's
off.
really hard enemies in there. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and you kind of have to like retrace your steps in a way, and kind of like have these landmarks. Like, okay, I think I'm going the right way. Maybe this door will be the one that takes me to that mold. Because you can use the map once you're in that proper level to kind of guide yourself through that floor. But getting back back there is not super straightforward.
No, the map's not. I mean, the map helps in general in a way, but you really have to go. Okay, so here's this staircase and it disappears. Where does it disappear to? And you go down the floor and you're like, okay, and then I need to go where? And like the paths don't always line up with what's on the map because there's stuff in the way.
Yeah,
So it's kind of a mind fuck. You have to like really like keep a lot of things in mind when you're going through there.
I
But
think
Ethan
the
does have a great line when you go back there after the power's gone out.
uh
I say a great line. It's not a great line, but I like to say it whenever he says it. I've gone through the game a couple times now, but he just walks in there and he goes, "It's dark." Yes, it's dark.
Great observation.
Yeah.
So I think the reason this section didn't bother me as much from that aspect was because the rest of the game was kind of absent from that. Besides, trying to track down treasures and maneuvering through the village, the rest of the game was pretty straightforward. So having this one section where I have to stop and like think about, like, okay, like where do I have to go? I kind of
Sure.
like that because it reminded me of when you got to make a long trek back through one of the old school games. So I kind of dug that, and I also
It could have
really
been a lot worse too. Like it could have been
totally.
like there are Resident Evil games where it's like put this item in the elevator and send it to this floor, but then also go up here. But make sure you have this item, otherwise you're gonna have to double back. And like it was not that complicated.
Yeah,
It was pretty straightforward.
I maybe had to stop and think for like maybe like 3 or 4 minutes to really be like, all right, where do I go? And then I kind of
Yeah.
figured it out. Like it was then I was there. Um, I also really like the sections where you have one of the tyrant cyborg looking dudes with the drill on their arm, and there's a door with like 4 red lights that you have to shoot. I thought those moments were really cool. Dealing with this guy chasing you while shooting off those lights,
Yeah.
which I totally cheesed. All I did was I placed a mine on the floor, and your own explosives don't do damage to you, right? That's correct. Like if you
I
set a
think
mine
if
literally on your feet and it blows
yeah,
up, you're
maybe.
good.
Maybe, yeah. I always thought it was like if you're in the middle of an animation when it goes off, it doesn't hurt you. But I thought that it would hurt you. I'm not sure. So
I
I
don't
don't
think
know.
it does because I
Yeah,
set it down right next to the door, and then the zombie walks up, triggers it, and then it just blew up all the red lights.
nice.
So I was very tactical about that. Um, but yeah, so given all this kind of new perspective on the factory being this kind of homage to Frankenstein or whatever, I still didn't like the Heisenberg boss fight. How are you feeling on Heisenberg?
Yeah, you asked me, I think the other day, what was my favorite boss, and I
Mm,
said Heisenberg. And it really comes down to what I was saying earlier about that was the victory lap. That was like, okay, the rest of the game is going to be easy street. You've suffered, so now we're going to reward you. And it's funny because the Heisenberg fight, and I think this is a pretty obvious observation, but to me that felt very much like Metal Gear Solid 4 with the Metal Gear Rex versus Metal Gear Ray boss fight. It was just spectacle. It was like, I don't care that this is stupid. This is awesome, you know. And not only the player saying that, but the developers saying that. Like, this is gonna be really fun, and this is gonna be something that the players can just kind of like see the fireworks go off and enjoy it for the spectacle. And I thought it totally delivered. And also I had just gotten off of like playing Returnal to death. So like aiming at little hot targets like with infinite ammo and just bombarding it while dodging obstacles. Like that was baked into my brain at that point. And I was so ready for that fight and it felt really great. I just super enjoyed it. It was
blocking
so over the
attacks
top.
with the blocking
Yeah, with
attacks
the
with the
chainsaw.
chainsaw was pretty cool.
And is I'm surprised that like it didn't hit any because you love Alien, right?
Oh
So
yeah,
I mean, did you not get in there
power
and go
loader.
get away from her, you bitch? Like come on.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
No, I think because again, like I've been saying, like I felt like Resident Evil 7 was going more for a subtle take on Resident Evil, while still having those those crazy moments that the franchise is known for. Again, I feel like the Heisenberg fight leaned a little too far into the Resident Evil 6 stuff that I'm not a huge fan of with this big metallic monsters and just
It's
metal
done so much
pieces.
better though than in 6. Like in 6, yeah, there's just over the top goofiness, but it doesn't hit. Like RE6, yeah, I think that the lunacy that you're pointing to again, like you look at Leon in the laser hallway in Resident Evil 4, like doing backflips and running on the walls, and even like the final boss in Resident Evil 4, Salazar like turns into a big ridiculous creature. I don't know. I think that those criticisms could apply to a lot of the games.
I think it goes back when you said something that really kind of struck a chord with me, and you said that, and I think it's what you said about Metal Gear, where I want Resident Evil to be something that it never has been, right?
Sure.
And I think when Seven came in and it was more of this grittier, like scarier, really dirty Texas Chainsaw kind of thing, I was like, all right, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then when Village came, and it wasn't like more of that. It was closer to like a Resident Evil 5 or 6. I was like, you know what? Fair enough. Resident Evil knows what it is and what it wants to be.
But you're not alone in feeling that way, obviously. Like this game has had mixed reviews even from diehard fans, It's kind of all over the place. I don't know, but for me it very much just is in line with what the series seems to have always been. Like it's always like from the start. Like Resident Evil 1, you're fighting giant sharks and giant tarantulas and giant snakes and all this stuff. Like it's so cheeseball, and like the voice acting is legendary for being terrible. Uh, Resident Evil has never been a franchise to take all that seriously. I think, and I get the desire for it to button up a little bit and
To,
be
to,
more.
to be like a Silent Hill or something,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, especially because it's dressing up in Silent Hill's clothes lately, right? So yeah.
I want to. So my favorite boss fight. I originally said in our chat from a couple days ago that it might be Lady D. Uh, I don't think that that's true anymore because I felt like Lady D was a pretty straightforward boss fight.
Did
There wasn't
did,
anything extraordinary about it.
did the Lady D fight remind you of Metal Gear Solid 4 also? Because
Yes,
it did me.
what is it? Screaming
Raven,
Raven? Yes.
show me your rage. Lady D literally has a line that's like, "Show me your something. Show me your cowardice. Show me." I don't know, but I'm
Yeah.
just like, I'm just thinking, "Show me your rage."
It's like in that kind of a clock tower kind of area,
Uh
her
huh.
circling
Just
around
flying
it.
around.
Yeah. But yeah, like a lot of people, I was surprised that she didn't stick around long enough. I would have liked to have a boss fight in her like normal form,
Yes,
but before getting
definitely.
into a mutated state. And the same with Heisenberg. I kind of wanted
Sure.
a regular boss fight with him in his, more humanoid look before turning into a giant metal thing. Um, Also, real quick, while on the topic of Lady D, I felt like the whole thing that Resident Evil has been doing since, well, originally Mr. X and Nemesis, obviously, but I feel like the whole Lady D being this character that kind of stalks you and it's kind of just walking around this main area in the castle felt a little tacked on. I feel like Capcom feels like they have to do that because it was so good in with Jack in 7 and Mr. X, and it kind of stumbled with Nemesis in Remake 3,
Yep.
and now I feel like they feel obligated to have the one character that stalks you, even if it is for a little bit and it's not all that threatening.
Yeah, I look at it as kind of like it's a tool in their belt of like, you expect this kind of thing in Resident Evil. This is going to be the thing that stalks you for a while. Yeah, I agree with you though. It wasn't all that inspired. They didn't do anything that creative at all with it. I think you got to do something to spice it up. You got to surprise the player with it. But
Yeah, and I also
yeah,
think the fact that she really stands out. I heard somebody say this online, and the fact that she's dressed in all white, super tall, she's kind of you can easily see her, and just like the cycles in which she walks through are kind of really easy to avoid her, running into her or whatever, or having her spot you. But anyway, I think my favorite boss fights, plural, might be with the three vampire ladies. But Yes, but not really. Because I think they were the most creative, and they had something there that I wish they kind of really like took advantage of. I love the idea that cold is their weakness, right? So
Yeah.
whenever you go into an area, you have to like bust a wall down, or break a window to let the wind in. I would have liked a boss fight that really hones in on that, and it has multiple stages where you gotta look around the room and fight. Okay, how do I get the cold in? And maybe it goes through different stages where then one of them chases you down to another room, and you got to figure out, okay, like how do I let the cold in? I thought that the way it was there, but it was super easy. This game,
And
like,
it all happens so fast. Like you take out all three of them, bam, 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 and
yeah,
you're like, oh,
once you got the cold in, done deal. The
uh
fight's
huh.
over. You know?
Like that could they could have had like one offs where you fight each of them the way that you do right now, but then they decide to retreat and then have a final like you take on all three of them at once and it's like a super dynamic fight. I think that that would be much more satisfying. I agree that like overall the castle feels kind of underbaked. It feels like there's a lot of missed opportunity in there. You have these characters that just from the marketing material, everybody's like, they're iconic at this point, and it's like you didn't do anything with them.
Yeah.
Like the demo and the trailers is basically everything there is to see, and that sucks.
Pretty much, yeah. And then they became such an iconic part of the marketing, and just the game as a whole.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's why those boss fights, because they have a little bit of like a dynamic element to them, but I wish they kind of went a little more complex with it, right? Because
I do want to call out though the notes about how they were made with like they had three women's corpses and
yes,
they covered them in flies and the flies were eating the flesh until there was just a big corpse shaped thing of flies and then they
yeah,
started rematerializing like
they
the
changed
notes
colors to like to fit the skin
to
tone
become
more.
yeah like the notes for like describing how creatures are made and like even the one with that like said Lady D's like full name, it was like, oh, she took to it really well. Like
Oh
she
yes,
still has the blood condition, but um, so like I love that stuff. Like even in old Resident Evil, I think Code Veronica has like a classic one about the stingray that they tested the T virus on and stuff like that kind of thing. I know a lot of people think it's I don't know, not the best way to deliver that information, but I love finding documents
oh dude,
about yeah,
absolutely.
about the experiments and stuff. And it gives you a little context about like what these things were before they became what they are and what was the process of creating them and all that stuff. I just love that shit. And I think that 7 has that one room. It has one room where you can read all that lore. This one has several. This one has quite a few actually. But yeah.
Yeah, there's
Anyway, you
yeah.
were saying about the vampires.
No, but I totally agree with that. I love like documents always got to be a part of Resident Evil, right? And I think there have been entries that have it significantly less than others. Like I think five might not really have
4 didn't have.
any.
Oh, 4 had a couple, yeah, but 5, I don't think so. It's meant to be 5 has some, I think, but it's
Yeah,
meant to be a co-op game, so
right, right. But yeah, I love that. I love what you kind of just have to like fill in the blanks and kind of just picture in your head how this whole thing went down.
oh, that's
Um,
another thing actually, like, the Ethan, not always, but often would react to the note that you just read.
right.
So, like, and that's another thing. Like, Ethan is more developed than even like the most iconic part characters in Resident Evil. You look at like Resident Evil 1, 2, even the remakes. Character well, in the remakes in 2 they do react to stuff, but you would find like a devastating note that's like Albert Wesker is a villain and killed your family and did all this, like oh my god, this note like spills the tea on the whole freaking concept of the game, and then you close the note and your character's just standing there with their gun and no reaction, you know like, but no, Ethan's the worst character ever. I don't know.
Javi, 3 words. House of Beneviento.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. No, this game or this part of the game kind of is like a little boxed up experience, it almost doesn't fit with the rest of the game, but I don't care. I don't mind that it's here. Like you can stay. But Yeah, like what a expertly executed little piece of horror content. You know, it's a slow burn. They take away your all of your weapons, but don't make a big deal out of it. You know, and then it's clearly like, okay, settle in. This is a puzzle area. You find that mannequin, and you gotta go into all the rooms and see how all the parts work with each other. Like it really kind of settles you into an unsettling environment. And then the sound design and the radio that would start staticking in, you hear Mia saying stuff, and then the lights start to go out, and then you find that well, and you're like, oh, I've seen this movie. um, yeah, I mean, and then of course the big reveal, the the
Yeah,
baby.
I think
Yeah,
I think to me now we've been saying before that PT has had its influences on
yeah,
horror games since its release. I think this is a clear homage to PT. You get in
sure.
the house, and I feel like all the noise just kind of drowns out when you walk into the house, and it's very much like PT. It's a normal ass, well, while still creepy because you got like pictures of puppets and stuff. It's just that vibe, that PT vibe of like the one lamp lit on the desk, just a really normal looking house with no music in the background, nothing really kind of disturbing the quiet. I like that when you walk into the house, you can explore, you go into the kitchen area upstairs, but there isn't really a reason for you to do so because there are
Yeah.
no items to pick up. You're
Hmm.
just walking around and there's nothing for you to interact with, and I think that really like just creeped me out. The fact that there were no prompts popping up and nothing. It's really just kind of it's seamless. It's a really just what's the word?
Immersive.
Immersive,
Yeah.
immersive point in the game where everything's just kind of taken out and you're walking around this house. And then yeah, more PT stuff's coming in with obviously like the big baby monster, like fetus looking thing.
It's all in the sound design with that thing. Like obviously it looks gross and it's creepy and all that. Like that all helps, but the audio,
The
like you can just
distorted
listen.
cries.
Yeah, well, and it's very very clear that they recorded a real baby.
Yeah.
Like that is a real baby that's, been modified, and it's just like ba ba dad dad go go, it's like, "Oh my god, this is really twisted. This feels like wrong, It's awesome."
Yeah, totally. You get the
I,
radio, reminiscent of "Don't turn
PT.
that dial."
Yep.
The
You've been chosen.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
phone ringing at one point,
Uh-huh.
and the whole thing of like kind of just looping, not looping in the sense of like how PT did it, but you're kind of going around the same areas. When you pick up a new
Yeah.
item, you go back down the same hallway. When you come back, there's something I think at one point like there's a
The
red light.
painting.
The
Oh
painting
yeah, there's the
falls.
red light,
There's a
the
red light,
painting.
very much like
Mhm.
PT. So yeah, I think this is the highlight for a lot of people in the game. And at first, when when I got through the section, I was like, this is what I wanted all of Resident Evil Village to be. But then I thought, no, I don't think that would be a good thing if the
No.
entirety of this game was this. I like that it's this one focus set piece to give you
Yeah.
more of the
Its brevity is its
supernatural.
strength.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the one set piece focused on this is the settling, supernatural theme, ghostly dollhouse section of this game, and it wouldn't be the standout that it is if more of those elements were found throughout the entirety of the game.
Yeah, and unfortunately on return playthroughs, like it's honestly the most monotonous part of the game.
I figured.
Like you know the solution to the puzzle, and you're not necessarily scared or, anticipating anything. You know exactly what's going to happen. And you just kind of have to like wade through it. So even though it is, I totally see why it's the highlight for most players. For someone who's looking to play this game over and over again, it's probably the low point in the long run. Even though I think it's excellent, it's executed perfectly. But also like how beautiful it was the trek to the house, right? Like that like memorial to I think it's her daughter maybe, with all the gravestones and the yellow flowers, and that's I assume what's making Ethan hallucinate. But then you take the elevator all the way up, and then that big reveal as you leave the cave to see the
The
gigantic
waterfall.
waterfall,
Yeah.
like a mountain-sized waterfall that's like
Yeah.
right next to a house. It's just like it's just such a spectacle. It
Like
was really,
something
really
out of
cool.
National Geographic or something. Just that
Totally.
giant waterfall.
Uh-huh.
Beautiful,
And
man.
yeah, it's very, very cool.
And I thought, I also liked. I like when boss fights, and I do consider like the last section of this house to be a form of a boss fight, right? For the doll,
Yeah.
like
No,
you're
it
not.
is
It doesn't
kind
have a
of.
health. Not that any of the Resident Evil bosses have a health bar, but you're not necessarily like you're not shooting at it. You're not like visibly doing damage. With your guns and stuff. But I like that it takes of an identity of its own, where
Yeah.
you're playing hide and seek with this doll, and I don't know if how true this is, but did you feel like the game kind of incorporates audio into trying to find where the one doll is hiding among the other
I
ones? Like,
think
does it
so.
have a special audio cue that's different from the others?
I think you can just kind of hear the specific giggle from the direction that the doll is at. I would say that, but I can't say with absolute certainty. But you do hear a specific laugh, and I imagine it's in the direction.
Yeah, I think if they played with that a little more to make that be the puzzle for this boss fight where you got to listen out for those audio cues. But I mean, it
Yeah,
might be there. Maybe on a second playthrough I'll pay more attention to that. But yeah, man, what a and I think yeah, like I said, I think this is the highlight of for a lot of people for
yeah.
good reason. But yeah, I'm kind of dreading because I've only played through the game once, and you have what now 3 playthroughs?
I'm on my fourth playthrough, just trying to clean up challenges and trophies. But I did the under 3 hours and no healing or under three healing items, something like that. I got
Nice.
those trophies, so out of the way. Once you unlock, like, actually playing on hardcore was a blessing because not only did it make sure that I was really comfortable with the game, but it also unlocked this revolver that uses sniper rifle rounds and it's more powerful than a magnum. And literally, I was just running through the game with infinite ammo, just one shotting everything. It's like, super fun. It's awesome.
That's one thing I wanted to bring up too. I kind of regret not playing the game on hardcore for my first playthrough because like a lot of people are saying, this game is easy on standard difficulty. Once you get not even because I know the thing with hardcore is that first section is
Oh my
really the
god.
most punishing, right?
The Resident Evil 4 like the whole village is against you moment where it's like just endless werewolves and there's no end in sight and literally all you can do is just try to survive long enough for the cutscene to play. That section is so brutal on hardcore. And I had read before the game came out, like, hey, if you're a Resident Evil fan, if you're a veteran of the series, please play on hardcore. The game's way too easy. And if you want the game to push back a little bit, you need to do it on hardcore. And so you know, I was committed to doing this. But man, that opening area, and it's literally the first thing in combat in the game. It took me 40 tries. I was just again and again,
Brutal.
the thing was that like that you have to fight one werewolf first in that confined area, and the controls are kind of wonky because they have the acceleration feature like that changes how
Right.
fast you
Aim
turn.
acceleration. Yeah.
Yeah, and all sorts of other things that just didn't make it feel quite right. Plus, the dude's like juking and jiving all over the place, and you're like not sure how they move yet. So so I'm on hardcore and I fight that one werewolf and it gets me in danger because if they grab you once, they put you in danger. So, like I make it past him, I kill him, but my checkpoint now has me in red, and that's how the next sequence starts. And so I would just start the sequence, get a healing item, heal up, and get attacked, and then I don't have a healing item anymore, and I try to last as long as possible, and it just wouldn't work, and it was a whole day. My whole first day playing this game was doing that sequence over
Oh
and over and
man.
over. And I was like, man, I don't want to change the difficulty. I refuse to change the difficulty. And what got me through is I saw Michael Huber put out a video about the Resident Evil difficulty, and he's like, I struggled really hard at the beginning. There was something in there that I could not get through, and I basically said, okay, if I don't make it this time, I'll change it back down to normal. And then he made it, and I was like, okay, I have to do this. I have to do this. I'm gonna lose my street cred, and so I
After
pushed through
committing a
that.
whole day to
Yeah,
it, you gotta.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I was at that point, I was kind of concerned because I had seen all the negative comments about, or negative, lukewarm at worst, comments about Resident Evil Village. I'm like, man, what if this game's just a huge disappointment? Seeing people complain about the factory and talking about the story, and then hating Ethan Winters so much and all this stuff, and I'm like, and then I'm not having a good time because I can't get through this section. Really, I was worried that like this isn't going to work for me. This game isn't going to click, and it's going to be a disaster. Uh, but no, like once I pushed through that, finally did it. I was not in a good mood. I was very mad. But the rest of the game was not a problem at all. It was challenging. I died here and there, but it was always fair. Um, it was very much a classic Resident Evil experience. Other than that, anyways, I went on forever about that. I'm sorry.
No, no, it's totally fine because I do think that what difficulty you decide to run the game for the first time is can be a huge factor on your
Yeah,
reception
and
of the game.
I feel like if I had played on normal, I would feel less enthusiastic about the game, and potentially also about the ending. About you know, like I've said a million times here, the Heisenberg fight onwards is like, okay, now let's just have some fun. The tension, let's ratchet it down, and let's just celebrate that we got here, man.
Yeah, yeah, I totally see that because for me, like, I think once I left the castle, that love not that the tension might have not ever have been there, right? But I think once,
Yeah,
especially once I leave the castle, I felt like I was on this one just kind of nice cruise to the end of the game.
totally. If the game didn't push back, if there wasn't that tension and fear and like paying really good attention to how much ammo you use and being afraid that you're not going to be able to get past the next thing, if I didn't have that, that takes away so much from the game.
Yeah,
So I totally get that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like even when I think the most like combat heavy section of the game is the Lycan's Den, right? Where there's
Yeah.
just like this endless
Yep.
horde of them. Even at that point, like I was never worried that I might die, even when I was super low on health. Because Resident Evil does
Mhm.
that, or not health, super low on ammo. Because Resident Evil does that thing where like I don't know how they do it, but like something in the game kind of adapts to however many items you have in your inventory, and it
Yeah,
maybe
I'm sure the
decides to
enemies
drop.
drop stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think like ever since Resident Evil 4, they had that kind of system running under the hood,
Which
where
is a good system because
absolutely,
Code Veronica has so many soft lock areas. Like I've my first time playing through Code Veronica, I saved right before a boss, but you're trapped in the airplane. There's no getting off. The airplane's in the air, so you have the items that you have. Period. And I did not. You can unload all the ammo I have in the boss, and it wouldn't take it down. So that's a soft lock. You just
yeah,
can't beat it. So you
that's
have to start
a
over.
legitimate like game
Yeah.
breaking problem.
Yeah.
So I think if you're gonna have a survival horror game where it has like that resource management element, you got to have some sort of system like that to avoid like that frustration of having to load an earlier save. Or if you're like me, I hate having multiple files, so I just overwrite the one section. So if I ever do lock myself, I'd have to start
Right.
completely fresh.
Hmm.
Um,
Actually, I heard that this game can does have a soft lock. If you're playing on like Village of Shadows difficulty, it's just you're especially prone to run into this because you have even less ammo. But like the swamp monster boss, if you don't have the equipment to take him down before you get to the boss, there's nowhere to go. You can't you can't leave.
oh
So
man, that's a
yeah.
problem.
Hmm.
That's pretty deep into the game too. I'm surprised
Yeah.
that this game didn't
You can
have.
still you can buy stuff from Duke though. So if you have the
Okay.
money, maybe you can. Yeah.
I
But
yeah, I was gonna say that I'm surprised that it didn't bring back even in Village of Shadows. Like, does it have you can only load from like typewriters thing, or does it still give you checkpoints?
I am not sure about that. I would imagine there are no checkpoints, but there might be.
Because I thought that was
Um,
awesome for Resident Evil 2
yeah.
remake and their hardcore difficulty. Once I heard that it's only typewriter saves and no checkpoints, I was like, it's been a while since I've had like a true classic Resident Evil experience, and I
Yep.
had to go for it, and no regrets. It was a really really memorable experience. All right, so to kind of start wrapping things up, Javi, what does the future of Resident Evil look like to you? Where do you think it's going next? Where do you want it to go next?
Hmm. 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 I don't know. I think that the Ethan Winters chapter was an interesting direction for the series to go. It did, like you said, suggest that maybe we don't need to follow these characters anymore. At this stage, it's interesting because like dates are a real thing in Resident Evil. Resident Evil 2 happened in 1998.
Yeah,
So these characters are getting up there. It's like,
that's true. That's totally
you
true.
know,
That's something I didn't think
like
about.
Leon and Claire and everybody, they're going to be in their 50s real soon, if not already. Um, so yeah, I think they should continue to introduce new characters and try out new things. I do like that they're not afraid to experiment with out there concepts, and this game definitely showed that. Um, you know, we point to Texas Chainsaw Massacre for seven, but it also played around with Saw with Lucas's area.
Yes, yeah,
Um, and Marguerite's whole bug thing was something else.
that was my favorite boss
um,
of seven.
oh yeah, me too, for sure. So disgusting. Um, yeah, and then going in the Universal Monsters route with Gothic horror, that's really cool and unexpected for Resident Evil. I'm excited to see where they go next. Honestly, I want them to just kind of surprise me. It'd be cool if they did do a more fan servicey kind of, but they're kind of doing that with the remakes. Like
Yeah, I think personally, I'm getting my fill of the classic characters through the remakes.
yeah, totally. Resident Evil 4 remake is going to be an interesting one
That's
because
an
that's a
interesting
game.
beast, man.
That's a big game too. It's huge. I don't know how expensive that project's going to be. Except for, 3 was cut down tremendously, so maybe they're gonna make 4 a lot smaller than it was. That'll piss off people for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know where I want the series to go. I want them to surprise me. I want them to continue to uh do things that people may not like.
And then I'll have you there to tell me to turn me
Hell yeah.
around on like stuff like the factory level and like no, here's
Definitely.
what it's really good.
I'll find a way to say that it's good. And I told you before the game came out, I'm like, man, I'm really concerned. I'm seeing a lot of negativity coming out about this game, and I feel like I'm gonna like it no matter what. And I guess I did.
That's good, man. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'd like to see, like you said, like with Resident Evil 9, do something weird again, because this game did do something weird, even though I had my expectations of like gothic horror and all that, going crazier there towards the end. Which, by the way, we didn't even touch on the whole Spencer and
Oh
Miranda
yeah,
link. So,
the lore.
yeah,
We gotta talk
yeah,
about the lore.
absolutely.
That's a whole other video. No, that's a fun thing. So, I talked about how the notes, I get a kick out of all the notes. I love reading about, getting more context about what's going on in the story. And Miranda's den, we didn't even talk about Miranda yet.
Yeah, at
But
all.
yeah, but that section where you have a whole book about Lady D, about all the four, what are they called? Siblings, four lords, yeah. Um, Reading each of those books was super interesting. Getting like Miranda's hot takes on each of them, like disgusting. I don't know,
Yeah.
definitely not a good host. What's weird is like Lady D, she's like, and even Heisenberg, she's like, they're pretty good, but not a good host. What? Why? Why not? Why'd you even like try it on them if you're not going to go for it?
You
I don't
made
know.
Magneto out of one of
Exactly right.
them.
Very strange. But seeing the pictures of Evelyn and then Miranda as one of the scientists that was working for the same company as Mia, and like all these photos. I don't know. I just I soak that stuff up. I'm like, this is awesome, man. I'm
That
like
was
getting
deep lore stuff that I wasn't really expecting from this game. Kind of like, kind of switching up the stuff, everyone's relationship with like Spencer and all that. Putting him into that, like Miranda being the OG in a way, right? Like she
yeah.
had.
I could I can totally understand a hardcore Resident Evil fan being really pissed off about that. Like
Those
it's a retcon. You're retconning the the whole thing. That like wait, so this was all inspired by some lady that you just introduced here and you're saying that Spencer was like she was his mentor? Like I understand why someone who is really invested in Resident Evil lore might hate that. Um, but I've always thought of Resident Evil lore as just it's there and it's fun to like go, oh okay, so then this happened to that, but I don't take it too seriously, like
totally.
I think it's all kind of goofy nonsense anyways. So
And it's
I
probably for
like
the
it.
better to stick with with that tone. Because like I said, like sometimes I wish for a Resident Evil more in line with like a Silent Hills kind of thing, where it's like deeper and it has
Sure.
these metaphors and this crazy meaning, whatever. I think it's good to have Resident Evil have this over the top kind of like action romp.
Especially because it's always been a convoluted mess of like that's unlikely, like the whole Resident Evil lore thing. If you dig into it, is like, oh, okay, it's just very contrived, very silly stuff. So this kind of thing, like it was just nice to see Spencer's name. It's sort of like in Resident Evil 7 when you walk into the foyer for the first time and then you see a picture of the Arklay Mountains and you're like, holy crap, the
Yeah,
Arklay
yeah.
Mountains, we're in the universe.
And like
It doesn't mean anything, but
like
it's
even though
cool.
it has the title and everything, it like legitimizes it even more, with having
Yeah.
Dark and Spencer's name and all that. It's like, oh yeah, this isn't like a soft reboot or something, because I
Yeah.
felt like going into seven, I felt a little bit, it's kind of like a soft reboot for the franchise. They might ignore some of the stuff that's been established in the game, but no, yeah, this is all part of the same timeline, right? Like we're not kind
Yeah,
of
that's really
messing with
cool.
it.
Although they did the line that at the end of the Oswald Spencer note was it was so on the nose that I was like, that's a little stupid. He's like, oh, and I'm gonna start a company and I'm gonna use that logo that we found in that cave. The umbrella. Like, oh come on, guys, be a
What
little more subtle.
when I saw the umbrella logo on that one like pedestal thing, I was thinking, wait a minute, like are they gonna do like a Assassin's Creed Templars thing where the umbrella dates all the way back to like medieval times, like they've always
They
been?
kind of did. They kind of did.
In a
Did you
way.
did you find that note when you're I think it's right after the wolf's den when you're like in the wall kind of shimmying by and you see all the werewolves like chewing on the dudes that are
Yeah,
hanging.
I remember that part.
Yeah, so you get past that and then you come across a barrel that's like ancient and there's like a note next to it and like the note is about like old medieval times. It's like, "Oh, they've broken through the wall, sir." And blah, blah. It's all written in a very oldie English kind of way.
I missed
And it's
that
like,
one.
"Wow." Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's like, "Wow, the grounds here are super old. Like they've been around forever."
So it's like
Uh
zombies in medieval times.
I don't think that's necessarily what they're saying, but like there was some sort of battle on the for the castle or something like that. I don't know. It was just cool to see
That's
a
cool.
note that's like, hey, this someone no one's been in this room for like hundreds of years,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
that is pretty cool. Oh, man, another one, something else I want to bring up. The BSAA soldiers being
What is that?
bioweapons. you
I,
know?
I th- to me that all reads like a trailer for the next Not a Hero DLC. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna have a Chris Redfield go shoot a bunch of zombies download pack.
Yeah,
Hopefully that's all it is. I don't want Resident Evil 9 to be that.
yeah, that's actually a good because that's where my mind went. Is like, oh, that'll be set up for the next game. But yeah, I can totally see that be a quick, Chris Redfield, has a quick little adventure. Although it was interesting because something I've always kind of like knocked Resident Evil for is that everyone wants to militarize these BOWs. Have hunters and lickers be out there on like
Yeah,
is
on
that
the
going to be
battlefield.
effective? Is that like
Nope.
these monstrous creatures are going to follow your commands? I can never buy that.
Yeah.
Unless it is like a nemesis or like a Mr. X where it's like a Terminator kind of thing. But if you're out there having zombies, like, be soldiers. But it was interesting that this game had competent soldiers like ziplining down from a helicopter, and they take off their mask and they're
Huh.
all grayed out and stuff. Like, oh,
That's an interesting point.
I wonder if they actually achieved what they've been trying to do this whole time of making these undead soldiers that don't feel pain, can't really are hard to kill, but
You know,
that can follow orders and stuff like that.
this is another us filling in the gaps because they're just not doing it for us. But like, they fumbled the ball really bad on Chris and his squad being the new Umbrella, and then if the BSAA are now the new villains, like what a cool reversal, you know.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that, or they didn't like we have to kind of make that bridge for them. Umbrella was nowhere to be seen on the Chris side of things. Um, they didn't even address that at all
Right, because
from
there
seven.
was that thing at 7 where you see the blue
Their
logo.
helicopter,
They didn't
yeah.
really approach it in this one, and
Nope.
that was one of like the bigger questions that 7 left off, and everyone was putting together the theories like, was Resident Evil Chris from RE7 a clone, and like the real Chris was off doing something else. You had all these crazy theories after 7. But yeah, I don't know. I think that being addressed in a DLC is a possibility because they do expect a good amount of DLC, especially after 7 getting some.
It, I hesitate to say so because I mean, seven's amount of DLC was unprecedented. It had so much. But like 2 and 3 really, 2 had a little bit, and then 3 had nothing. Um, I guess the resistance side mode got some support for a little bit there, but
Yeah.
Resident Evil 3 didn't get any DLC, which is a bummer. So I don't know if we're following the trend, it probably won't get any DLC.
Mm.
But but I don't know. With that ending, it seems like they're hinting at something. Like Chris is gonna go on some adventure. It's weird that he's like change our course straight to BSAA Europe. It's like, wait a minute, you guys aren't gonna like regroup or anything. No, just go straight there. Bring Mia. It's fine.
uh, but yeah, so future of Resident Evil again, more crazy stuff for Resident Evil 9. Give me something unexpected. Maybe I mean, even though this game kind of addressed like supernatural, ghostly kind of stuff, I'd love to see like a supernatural Resident Evil, like the prototype of Resident Evil 4.
But that's a thing that's interesting though. Like, despite going into werewolves, vampires, and ghost dolls, they still found a way to make them all
Right,
bioweapons.
to make
You
it
know,
science fiction rather than supernatural.
right? Yeah, like everything Ethan sees in that house is a hallucination from the flowers, so they can explain that away. And even there were like ghosts in the Resident Evil 7 demos, but in my head canon, it was always Evelyn just kind of, creating herself out of mold in different parts and
Yeah,
then
yeah, totally.
disappearing that way. So, yeah, so to me, it's always found a way to make the most ludicrous, outlandish, seemingly supernatural thing actually just science fiction. And I
Yeah.
like that. I don't mind that at all. There's that early concept video of Resident Evil 4 where Leon's actually walking around with ghosts everywhere. And there's like that hook man that comes out of the painting and stuff. Um, I feel like that ship has sailed to make Resident Evil just full blown, uh, you know,
Sci-fi.
ghost, yeah, like ghost horror, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
experiments.
I would rather they didn't go that route, but if they do, whatever. Who cares?
And I guess we'll see when it comes to Resident Evil 4 because that's a crazy beast on its own. Has it ever been like 100%? Yeah, it's happening, confirmed, like by Capcom. Like, is it still just heavy speculation?
Yes. No, they said they're making it. Yeah. That's
Okay,
the next up, which breaks my heart. I really think Code Veronica should get a
absolutely.
remake.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Code
Also,
Veronica.
like, they never make a big deal out of the fact that Code Veronica is the only game with the Redfield siblings in it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
They never cross paths ever, except for in Code Veronica.
And it's still
Like,
even
come
for
on.
like a short bit, right? It's like just most of
At
the
the
end of
end,
it.
Yeah, at the end. Yeah, I don't know. More Claire, please. I love Claire. That's my
Yeah.
favorite character.
Well, Javi, thank you so much for joining me on this chat. It's been a lot of fun. If people want to see more of you, where can they find you?
Ooh, go to youtube.com/critbox, CRITBOX, or just look up Critbox in general. I make videos about, well, not really Resident Evil, but it's not off the menu. I might do it, but I usually make stuff about the Switch and Nintendo hardware and just kind of hardware all around. I don't put myself in a box, but it's about video games. If you want to see video game content that's I shoot it with this camera and try to make it look pretty nice. I don't know. I've gotten some compliments,
Yeah,
but
that B-roll, man.
yeah,
Amazing.
so go check out Critbox if you want to see more of me and hear my voice. So there you go.
And I bought like a controller off your recommendation solely, one of the
Perfect.
Joy-Cons. So yeah, definitely check his stuff out for more of that. But yeah, so I'm Diego. You can subscribe here for more stuff. This was fun. This is the first time
Always.
I've done a usually I do comic book uh, you know uh, IP games based on intellectual properties. Is the first time I've done like just something off the wall, and it was a lot of fun. And hey, I look forward to maybe doing some more in the future.
For sure. This was a ton of fun. I had a lot of things to say, as you all saw. So I can't wait until our next discussion. So
Awesome. Well,
thanks.
once again, thank you thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.
Bye.